Hello there and a warm welcome to the final edition of TBS for the year 2014. Now, prices of petroleum products will be reduced by at least 10% effective January 1, 2015. That's according to the National Petroleum Authority's boss, Moses Asare. Now, the regulator has therefore directed oil marketing companies to effect this change at all retail outlets. The decision takes a balanced position of continuous effort to reduce outstanding under recoveries and at the same time reflect falling prices of petroleum products on the world market. That's what Moses Asare said. Well, petrol currently sells at about 17 Ghana cedis per gallon, and the public considers that price the public considers outrageous in the light of a considerable dip in the price of crude oil on the world market. Now, the news broke on News Today when Kemini Nyamani Amano spoke to the Chief Executive Officer of the National Petroleum Authority, Moses Asare, at midday. This is how their conversation went.
I think that we needed to look at, first of all, what is the trend of the international prices for crude oil. Then also we needed to look at the international prices trend for products, because there's a difference between products and then crude oil. Everything that we've been announcing have been crude oil price drop, crude oil price drop. But we go a step further to look at what is the FOB prices, petrol, on diesel, on LPG. And then after studying the price decrease, we think that this is now the right time for us to be able to make a 10% decrease for motorists, and at the same time to be able to save something for EDCs to pay the debt, because the debt is not yet complete. We have paid almost 260 million cedis in the last 3 months, and we are still left with 170 million cedis. So as of today, we are going to pay 45 million cedis in the next 2 weeks. That will bring their balance to about maybe 90 to 110 million cedis. At the same time, been able to reduce prices by 10%, reflecting petroleum, that is FOB petroleum prices.
At what point should we expect it to reflect at the pumps?
Oh, it is going to be tomorrow morning, 6 a.m.
From the 1st of January?
Yes, 1st of January.
Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. it is. But what are the expected impacts of this action, and why is the NPA taking an about 10? Because it has said that it wouldn't review the prices downwards. Well, we will be doing some expert analysis whilst we seek answers to these questions from relevant persons. I am Gifty Ando-Apia, and this is today's big story. Please stay. Welcome back. Now, in the studio with me is an energy expert. His name is Kojo Poku, and he's joining us to have that discussion about the NPA's action. Now, thank you very much, sir, and many thanks for joining us here on today's big story. I'm fine. I hope you're well, too.
I'm very well. Just a bit of a cold, but I'm okay.
Oh, you'll be fine. Probably you should be excited now that they're reducing the prices by 10%.
No, why should anybody be excited? 10%?
Yes.
Why 10%? That's the question I asked. You know, over the years, whenever there is a very minor increase, you realize that even the lorry fares, the GPITUs will tell you, oh, this is not a significant increase, so we can't even decrease the prices. Now, if you look at the dip in world prices, it's not 20%, it's not 50%, it's quite a bit. It's from hundreds to the 50. As of today, it's $58. Now, when it comes to importation of petroleum products, which is what mainly we do now, we look at the Platt price, which is the ex-refinery prices on the world market. Now, if TOR was working 100%, then you look at the ex-refinery from TOR. But since TOR is not contributing significantly, and most of the BDCs now import the product from Europe, we look at the Platt price. Now, even if you had a stock which lingered on from the old prices, Plat prices has fallen drastically. Okay.
By what percentage are we looking at?
I don't have access to the Plat prices because it's only people who are registered on the Plat platform have access to it. But let's look at the figures. Crude was about 110 in middle of last year.
Right.
Over the hundreds. Now it's 58. So it's a reduction of $48. Now, if the ex-refinery in any country will be definitely a sizable amount. What I'm saying is that Honorable Asaga talks of under recoveries that they need to pay.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Nobody has a problem with that. But the problem is that there's an equation, which is the petroleum pricing formula. Okay, put in the present Plat price. Tell us what it's supposed to be. Okay, if it's supposed to be 10 Ghana cedis, let us know that if it wasn't for the under recovery, this is how much Ghanaians should have paid. But we are going to pay X amount for 3 months to recover the 90 million or 100 million that we do owe the BDCs. And after that, Ghanaians will know that, okay, we've enjoyed some sort of...
so you expected something from the NPA that says that, well, this is the entire amount, and this is how far we can go
yeah, clarity.
as far as reduction
is concerned.
And subsequently, we will reduce it further. You're expecting something like
that?
Yes,
because 10%, I'll be honest with you, if GPRTU reduces their fares tomorrow, if the 10%, there have been increases of 10%, and GPRTU was asked not to increase prices.
Right.
So in the past, you had NPA come out and said, oh, there's been increase in petroleum prices. We need to increase crude by 10%. And they've increased prices by 10%. And GPRTU have been asked not to reduce prices. So if you reduce it by 10% now, 17 Ghana cedis a gallon. What's 10%?
It won't be justifiable to go back to the GPRTU and tell them to reduce their fares.
Because 10% of 17 cedis is what? 1 cedi 70 pesos.
So in effect, this will probably amount to nothing, in your opinion.
I don't know the conversation that will happen tomorrow at the lorry stations. But normally what happens is that it's only when people get to... My position is this, okay? We live in a country where we are all daughters and sons of the same father, which is government is the biggest employer, okay? Government being the biggest employer, if you do reduce our basic standard of living, petroleum prices affect every facet of our society. If you are to reduce petroleum prices by a sizable amount, what does the government gain? The government gain reduced living standard of living, where people are now saying, look, we are broke.
Yes.
And not that they are saying it. Everybody feels that we are broke. There's no money in the system. So even before Christmas, Honorable Asaga could have done this before Christmas, in 1st December. Why wait till 1st January when people could not buy the chicken and the eggs to celebrate Christmas? And you're doing it now.
But if you tell me that this reduction would amount to, in effect, would amount to nothing, then it probably wouldn't make any difference if it even had to be done before Christmas.
Well, but I would have expected a little bit more than what they've done now. Look, let me give you an example in 2008. When the Kufuor administration basically went for a rerun, all of a sudden we saw a reduction in petroleum prices. The question I ask myself is, really? So you could have reduced prices all along and you didn't, and just because you have to go for a rerun, you take us that, oh, okay, let me give Ghanaians some money back and they'll vote for me. And you know what happened? Ghanaians never voted NPP.
That brings me to a political aspect of the analysis, because you could clearly see that there's some kind of politics being played in here.
Well, I don't know why anybody would play politics with our livelihood. Look,
but
you and I...
That happens in this country all the time.
That is the problem I have. You and I don't deserve that.
Right.
Look, the math are simple. Petroleum prices has gone down around the world.
Sure.
In America, it's cheaper. Look, there's about 45% factor of taxes in what we pay today.
Right.
Okay? If you ask NPA, and you journalists can do that, ask NPA, what is the tax percentage of what we pay? The 17 Ghana cedis ex-pump, or so be it 15 cedis, 30 pesos that we're going to pay from tomorrow. What is the ex-pump? What is the percentage of taxes in there? You realize that it's about over 50%. Because 50%. Recently...
Let me leave you on that 50%. We will come back to you. But we have Kwekwa Jemandua on the line, and he is a coordinator for the Association of Oil Marketing Companies. Good evening to you, sir. Many thanks for your time.
Good evening.
Now, let me find out from you, from where you sit. The NPA has announced a 10% reduction in petroleum prices. From where you sit, what is that impact that we're expecting on the consumer directly?
Well, I mean, there have all been hue and cry about getting the price reduced. And for us, NPA is a regulator, what it tells us what what we do. So beginning tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., the phone price will reflect as they have indicated. So that's what we're going to do. And for us as well, this year particularly, business has not been too good. From June when we had all those supply pick-up, has not been too good for us. And so the volumes are not as we used to have, and our margins are very low. So obviously, we are not, this year has not been too good for us. The other side of it is that if you continue, for us, it's a trend. If you continue to have this downward trend of fuel prices going low, and we need to be a little bit efficient in our stocking. We may not be able to stock as much as we used to do because obviously if the prices are buying every 2 weeks at the downward trend, what it means is that we need to employ a JIT just-in-time process so that we don't really run around in terms of cost. So that's what the adverse effect is from that. But be as it may, consumer is the beneficiary. They're happy about it. We go ahead and we also try to be efficient in our stock.
But from what you tell me, if that, what do you make of the percentage? Because I have an energy expert with me here in the studio, and what he says is it probably will amount to nothing, 10%.
Well, that one is debatable. If I will not be talking as a coordinator, if I talk as an average economist, because no matter how 10%, if a gallon is 17, this part of our business. If a gallon is 17, then you are going to get 1.7. Cumulatively, it's something else. You can use the money to do something else. I like his point. He was talking about it should have come earlier. But see as it may, you can save on. And there are little drops. So who knows what will happen the next 2 weeks when we have, because it's predicted that it's going to continue falling. And especially this winter time is still falling. It gives us something to see about, but it's going to be on. And gradually we'll be making some gains. Everywhere else, I mean, in the UK, nobody's going down a big quantum, reduction. Indonesia, Philippines, UK, it's all becoming gradual. We take a little at a time, Eventually it becomes very big figure. So I think we should go with what we have now and see how the trend goes.
But does this come to you as some sort of good news?
Oh, good news for our business. No, what it means is that we need to be cautious what we do. Like I was saying, I mean, if we continue to have the trend, obviously, something we have to be a little bit more efficient. What it means is that some stations are not very efficient. We are able to turn over their stock so far. We may not be able to supply because we would like to keep so much stuff where that money is suffering like that.
I beg your pardon, could you repeat that?
Yeah. What I'm saying is that what retail outlets would not able to turn over the stock in a relatively short time, it becomes difficult, putting your petroleum stock, high stock over there. Because when the stock cannot be turned out so fast, and the price falls, it means you are going to do. You need to make up for the difference to your supply. So we have to be a little bit more efficient.
Well, Mr. Ajamaja, you stand on the line a bit a little while longer for me, because I have in the studio with me Kojo Poku, who is an energy expert, and he thinks that he's the person that's actually saying that this 10% really probably should have come earlier. But he doesn't seem to agree with you.
No, you see, that's the business side of it. Now, let me give you another point to it as well. You remember there was a time when the government came to say that, they need to do a reconciliation with the BDCs because what the BDCs are saying that the government owes is not what the government owes.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's flip it. Now there's going to be only a 10% and there's supposed to be a recovery. Do you know who collects that money? It's the BDCs.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a formula. How much the BDCs charge? They import the price at a very cheap price, but they still sell it at a higher price, only less 10%. So they still collect that margin, okay? Now, the government will have to go back to them and say, look, we allowed you to collect this amount of money. Give us back that money.
Does it work like that?
Look, that is how it works, because the same way government, the BDCs were asking, ask yourself, why was the BDCs asking government for money for the subsidies? Because they were undercharging us. Okay? If we were supposed to pay 20 Ghana cedis, the government was asking them to charge 17 cedis, so of every gallon, government will give them 3 cedis. Okay?
So you think the government will go back to them and
no,
take
but
that
that is how it's going. Government does not import the fuel.
Okay.
It's the private companies that import the fuel. They import the fuel and they sell it. Okay. What you buy at the X pump was not brought in by the government. Was brought in by a private company. Chase Petroleum, Sirius, Springfield, all the other companies that import fuel. Now, government NPA is saying that, look, charge the same price that you are charging, less 10%. So the BDCs are going to have that margin. BDCs and the OMCs are going to have that money. So the government is going to have to go back to them and say, look, we allowed you to charge this much. Let's do a reconciliation. If we owe you the money you say you owe you, take off and then give us. The same way that there was a problem when there was a subsidies, I can assure you there's going to be that same problem now, because after they've collected the money, they'll come up with all sorts of stories why they don't have the money for you.
I see. Interesting. Well, so the OMCs, how does the OMC benefit? I mean, who is benefiting at this point?
Nobody. What I'm saying is that what the government's position is, according to Honorable Asaga, is that there is a subsidy which they need to pay back.
Right.
We don't argue that. It's true, because obviously we were paying less than what we'd have naturally paid. Okay. Exactly. So there is a difference that needs to be paid back. But the problem is that now that they are saying that it's 10%, I think that they should have given the consumer a bit more relief initially, then gradually take back whatever is owed. The 10% is going to leave a big chunk of the money with the OMCs and the BDCs, and the government will have to collect that money from the OMCs and the BDCs.
And that's why, Mr. Ajimajia, this is some good news for you, I suppose.
Yes, I mean, yes, he's making a point. I mean, which is he's looking at the broad thing, so that all the stakeholders benefit, not just one side. And I think that's a good.
If you could reposition, because it's a bit difficult to hear you, reposition, and then we will come back to you. But one of the main services which are usually affected by such such price adjustments are transport fares. Now, joining us on the telephone line now is Robert Saga, and he is Robert Saba. He is the Greater Accra chairman of the GPRTU. Hello, sir. Good evening to you, and many thanks for your time.
Good evening to you and listeners as well.
Right, so there's a 10% reduction in petroleum prices. What do we see tomorrow at our various lorry stations?
Well, you will not see any change in the transport fares, because it is not only petrol or fuel that we take into consideration in coming out with transport fares. There are some other cost elements which, you know, the prices remain the same. The income tax that we go in for, it has not been reduced. The DVLA registration, it has not been reduced. The insurance cover has not been reduced. We don't have the money by ourselves. We have our money through this savings and loans company. Their lending rates has not come down. It also remains the same. The tithes that we buy, the maintenance is the same. The spare parts that we buy are also the same. Look, we have families, we have children. Out of the work that we do, we are able to pay their medical fees. So if we reduce ours, and the medical practitioners fail to do so, is that a proper the proper thing to do? What of the water bill?
Were you expecting a much higher percentage in the reduction, or is it that the GPRTU has a fixed position when it comes to charging transport fares?
We cannot tell whether we are expecting a big margin or not, because we were not invited. We don't know the discussion that went through. But like Oliver Twist, we wish could have gone higher than the 10%.
Now, I'm asking whether you're expecting more reduction, because you say nothing is going to change at our various lorry stations, even with the reduction of 10%.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. That nothing will change in terms of the transport fares because of, the cost element, the other cost elements that I've earlier on enumerated, like the spare parts that we buy. It has not been reduced. In any case, when fuel was being sold before the decrease, we were operating at a loss.
Okay.
And this is the time that we will be able to recoup some of our losses. With this 10%, it will at least pushing us to recoup some of our losses. But to say that will reduce the lorry fare, I don't think it will be possible now.
And if the NPA should, or any regulatory authority should come and try to sit with you to come to a conclusion where you reduce your fares, it still will not work?
Well, I don't think, anything at all can change this decision. Unless the fishermen, unless they also reduce their the amount of costs that they sell the fish to us. The market women, will they reduce their wares or their produce?
All right.
The market produce.
All right.
These are all factors that must be taken into consideration.
Right. That's a very long chain
should not be on
there.
drivers alone.
That's a very long chain there, but I think we will leave it there for lack of time. Thank you very much. Robert Saba is the Greater Accra Regional Chairman of the GPRTU. But let me go on to the telephone lines again and speak with, wrap up with Kwekwa Jemai, who is coordinator of the Association of Oil Marketing. Before we let you go, finally, how was your reaction to this?
Oh, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, it calls for us to be a little more. In the midst of our margin season, our margins are really, really low.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we're still having a bit of a bad line there. But thank you very much. Kwekwa Jemai is coordinator for the Association of Oil Marketing Companies, giving us his perspective there. So I come back to you. And you were laughing and smiling at the submission of the GPRTU.
I told you earlier.
That falls in line with
what I was saying. 10% is because in the past, there have been 10% increase and they've been told not to do anything about the prices. So if NPA really wanted to do something for Ghanaians, 10% is really laughable.
So 10%, this 10% that we have, like the OMC man is saying, let's try and do with what we have now.
Right.
So who is doing with the 10%? I mean, who is it benefiting at all?
Nobody. No, but hold on. If I fill a tank, let's be honest with ourselves. If I buy 10 gallons every day, okay, now it's down by 10%. So it's down by 1 cedi, 70 pesos. So 10% is 17 cedis. So when I go to the pump, I'll only save 17 cedis. In the scheme of things of what we are facing, is 17 cedis really? 17
cedis?
17
cedis. Money.
Is it? Have you 17 cedis? No, 17 cedis. 170, 17 cedis, yeah. No, 1 cedi, 70 pesos times 10
is 17 cedis. 170,000 old Ghana cedis.
Yeah, but what does 17 cedis buy you for breakfast? Imagine you want to have breakfast.
1 cedi, 70 pesos.
1 cedi, 70 pesos times 10 is 17 cedis. What does that buy you for breakfast or lunch?
Well, for lack of time, we would have to leave that conversation.
No, thank you very much.
But it's been very insightful and sharing your perspective with us. Well, it appears that 10% is good news to some people, but not to you and I who happen to be consumers. 10% is definitely not enough. But this is today's big story, and keep watching because when we return, we'll have Marian Toure going interactive. Please stay.